Our next speaker is Mo. She's the Director of Operational Excellence at G-Tech Velocity at Google. She blends a passion for education and operations to drive success in multiple fields, including Google's K-12 EDU outreach, serving as Finance Director and Chief Compliance Officer for Google Wallet, and taking the helm as Executive Director of the Stanford Educational Leadership Institute. I'd like to welcome Mo and the rest of our panelists to the stage, please.
Thank you so much, Tony. Hi, everybody. How is everyone doing? Great? All right. So you'll probably know that I used to teach high school, so I'm very comfortable in front of large crowds, but this is a humongous crowd, so I think you're really going to enjoy this panel. On my right is Ning, who is the VP of Facebook and engineering, and then we have Lee, who is the engineering lead for Pinterest, and then Sophie, who is the Director of Engineering at Google. So I'm going to invite my panelists to have a seat. I think most of you will recognize this composition of this panel is very different than the one we just had. But I think you'll enjoy this panel very much. They are like superstars, rock stars, actually. I'm walking down the hall with them, and people are stopping them left and right. So I think you'll enjoy learning from them about their career trajectories. And so let's go ahead and get started. So my first question to the panelists is really about how you got your start in tech and what led to the success that you've had to date. Anybody can start.
It's actually quite straightforward. I'm a computer science major, and after...
Here, there you
go. Mine is pretty straightforward. Computer science major for master's degree, and then went to IBM research for a number of years, and then joined Facebook a few years ago.
Quite a long time ago. Okay, so mine's sort of similar. I started at Fudan University, Bachelor in Computer Science, then Wisconsin Madison Master. Cisco was my first job, then a startup, then Google 2002, then Baidu 2010, then Google again 2014, and then I joined Pinterest as head of engineering 2016.
I guess mine is much different, probably just a few years earlier. So I graduated from USTC, University of Science and Technology, China, and then came to UC Berkeley for my grad school, and then postdoc to Caltech, and then started my first job in a startup, and then find my way to Google, and accidentally, and then stayed there forever.
So I don't think any of us succeeds on our own. So my next question for the panelists is really about what helped you succeed along the way, and if there were any turning points in your career. Were there any specific decisions that you made that really helped you accelerate? So what has helped you along the way, and were there any specific turning points in your career?
I can start. When I joined Google 2002, I was a system engineer, and I view myself a great system engineer. Even today, I still think so. So I always thought I would just go on as a good engineer and then architect, and in Google, that path seems quite successful. 2005, after I came back from maternity leave, my manager, who's a VP of engineer at that time, Bill Corrin, asked me to step in to lead a team called CJK team, which is a totally different team. I don't know the product very well because I was focusing on indexing, crawling system, backend, and the CJK team is more focused on the Chinese, Japanese, Korean market, including the map, input method, and segmentation, this kind of so on and so forth. So at the beginning, I resist the idea because I want to manage the team that I feel comfortable if ever I want to be a manager. But Bill convinced me to take a try, and he gave me the space. He said, why don't you try 3 months? If you don't like, I promise I will let you go back as an engineer. So I thought I should do whatever your boss asked you to do, and at least he gave me a space out, so I tried comfortably. It was a struggle at the beginning, and I have a hard time to understand my input or contribution because I don't write code anymore. The project meeting, sometimes I don't quite understand what my engineer is doing, and I feel really struggled. But I also realized what's my input. Because I've been in Google for a while at that time, I know a lot of people, whenever my team struggled, I can help them to find the right contact point and help them to get the resource and move things along. So eventually, after 3 months, my manager asked me to stay another 3 months. And then after almost close to a year, I realized it is actually a good for me. And I actually have the capability to manage a team, even though I'm not coming from that team. That was a moment for me to realize I have the other potential. And ever since then, I step on the management track and enjoy that.
Ning or Sophie?
It's interesting. So I stayed at IBM Research, which is Almaden Research Center, not far from here. I worked there for 7 years as my first job in the industry. There I had a quite comfortable life. So I think I can finish 8 hours job in less than 8 hours. So I had a lot of spare time. So during that time, I watched a lot of TV. Many of them are much of it probably junk TV. So it was comfortable. And then I moved to the East Coast because of my husband's job. When I really thought I had settled down on the East Coast. We bought a big house there. It only cost a fraction of what it would cost here. So it was very comfortable. I thought I settled. Then I got the Facebook offer. It was a very, very hard decision for me whether to take the offer or not, because we thought we settled, and everything was comfortable. I just gave birth to my daughter, and I think really on the one side it's a lot of certainty in knowing that life was comfortable. On the other side, there were a lot of unknowns. I interviewed at Facebook. The culture was very different, a little bit scary for me, and at that time. So it was a very hard decision. In the end, the decision came to the point where, at that time, I was working on some distributed system related work. And at IBM, I was playing with tens or hundreds of machines. And thinking about Facebook and the scale that they have, I was really, really curious about how they support the scale that they did at that time. And it finally comes down to, I'm really curious how they did it. I don't know how to do it. I want to learn how to do it. And finally made the decision to join Facebook. And I moved all the way back to the West Coast. My husband didn't move until a few years later, so it was really hard, but I don't regret that decision. What made a huge difference to me when I joined Facebook, I approached it very, very differently at that point. When I joined, it was not my first job anymore. I saw a lot of technical things which I wished I had spent time in my previous 7 years to learn more about. So I was more, how should I say, driven and more focused on the kind of technical skills I want to grow. And really always focus on improving technical skills. And later, after I moved to management, and so always focus on improving skills and keep me growing afterwards.
For me, I've always thought of myself going to be a scientist. So I stayed actually in a wet lab, which means doing an experiment, for a total of 10 years before I moved to industry. I think that's the first transition point for me, a career change. Why we made that change? Number of factors. I think is because my husband also then had a very academic-driven career too, both of us in grad school. And it's very hard to find, have the two-body problem. For us to have the ideal school, be able in the same location, is almost impossible. And let alone, we also have a feeling like we've never tried the world outside of the lab. What does it look like? He was the one much more adventurous than me, so he tried different things. He went to industry first. Then I have the decision to make, kind of like Ning, I was behind him for a year, and then I said, where I want to go. So I sent out 2 resumes outside of academic. Before then, I was a very one-track mind. I have to get this fellowship. I have to get this school. I have to have this many paper. I have to have a science. I did all that, but the road is getting very, very narrower for me. The choices are very, very little and a little. And then we say, my husband get back to the Bay Area, where we started. For me to get into the Bay Area schools, and that's an option, right? And then back then, the funding, it's very hard to find an academic job. So at a very emotional moment, I submitted 2 resumes, and then I got both offered. And I said, should I go or not? This is industry. Eventually, I decided to give a try. I said, I can always go back to academic if I didn't like it. But the industry was interesting because it really opened up my mind. I used to work on a gene and 2 genes and done a whole bunch of experiments, but I really limited myself to a scope and thinking that's the thing I want. But unless you tried something else, you wouldn't know what you're good at, what you would be enjoying to do. So the 2 offers is also very different. That's another choice I made, and probably changed my career in industry as well. One is a law firm, and actually not really a law firm, it's a patent, because I didn't have a law degree initially. So there's a patent firm. They do all the patents for Cisco, for all the high tech, because I have a degree in chemical physics, then biochem. I have a very wide technology scope to understand the different things, so they were very interesting to hire me to be their patent agent. And then the other offer is a young startup founded by 6 Stanford graduate students, 6 of them, a little bit too many, because you know how decision making could be tough, right? When you have 6 founders, it's really hard. But it was fun, because I was their 26th employee, and then in one building, everyone is really young, so I took the startup job at a $30K less pay. So it was one decision. And that startup didn't really make it. But that startup opened up in my mind is that I really enjoy working with the people. So the jobs has to be, it's an environment you need to enjoy working at. And then you're learning things. You're trying different things. You're really bringing up the potential you never realized you had. And then you made friends because you're doing something interesting together. And not because you like them, you have the common mission. And then your friends will take you to unexpected places, including Google. So that's how I landed Google, is an extra colleague in that small startup who started in Google and then wanted me to give a try. I said, what do I have to do with Google? I don't really have what they need. And then she said, no, you know Japanese. So this is the thing that back then she was an international quality analyst, and then she knew me from the previous work because I took 3 years of Japanese in grad school because I couldn't get up early enough to do experiment because you have to sign up for the machine. So I forced myself to get up every day at 8 to go to the Japanese class. Then I'm the first one in the lab to get the machine and can start my experiment run, and I can go to the class. So that brought me eventually to Google. I was the CJK quality analyst. So.
Work with me.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's before data science was cool. So my recruiter gave me a T-shirt that says, we worked on data science before it was cool. That was really it. So I think when I see all those transition points, one thing natural for me is I'm really curious in problem solving. So to solve a problem, I'll change disciplines. I'll move from physical chemistry to biochem and to cell biology. eventually to bioinformatics. It's all like followed my curiosity and what I want to learn, and then keep learning, and then eventually dealing with data. I'm like, finally, I've got so many data, there's so many problems to understand, then I can settle there for a little while. So that's where I am now. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. As you could hear from their stories, there's really certain themes that are running through, right? So a lot of risk-taking, for sure, and making choices when you don't know what the outcomes are going to be. I heard there's a theme of just the love for learning and just saying, okay, this is a new opportunity, but also there's somebody behind, I think, all three stories of encouragement, right? So you have to find people who are going to mentor and advocate for you and encourage you. I know that many of you sat through the rejection therapy this morning. Is that good? Yeah, and so I think a lot of this is also not fearing that rejection piece if something goes wrong. So I heard that in the stories too. Just going out, taking risks, learning something new, and that's pretty exciting. So the trailblazing is definitely there. I have a couple more questions, but I really would like some participation from all of you too. So prepare your questions for these three amazing women as I ask them a couple more questions. And I think Tony had a mic that will go around to the audience after these next couple of questions as well. All right, thank you. I got the thumbs up. Awesome. So in terms of trade-offs and risk-taking, how do you think about that? And you know, I think this is a women in tech panel. So were there any trade-offs or risks that you took that you think were very specific to you as a woman in tech that perhaps your male colleagues wouldn't have had to make?
Let me start by saying that I want to say two stories. One is about myself. When I had the Google China office started during the time I have my first baby. So it's very clear I don't want to go because I have my first baby on the way and I'm already 30, more than 30, so I really want to play safe. But then since going very well, I'm always curious about the other side of story. So I really think about that, and I talked to Kai for multiple times. But then I was pregnant with the second baby. This time, I'm really struggling. And I think, should I go, should I not go? At the end of the day, I still stay with my family because I believe as a mom, I want to provide the best living condition and the best environment for my kids. And I don't regret that decision. But I have seen so many of my male colleagues decided to go, and they can make it work because a lot of them just go there alone and leave the family behind. And I don't feel right to do so. Sometimes I question whether that's just about me or about women. Now, I still don't have an answer, but I want to share a second story. One of my good friends in a big internet company, I don't want to name it, she's doing phenomenally good, but her promotion's always slower in my mind than her male partner. Then I asked her, do you feel right? Why don't you ask for it? And she said, no, I feel it's justified because I spend a lot of time with my family. This is a trade-off I want to make. So she really convinced her this is the right way, and even though in my mind, she's doing extremely well. Now, when I look around, I know of a lot of male colleagues also spend time with family, go ski, spend vacation with the family. They are doing well as a father too. So I started to question whether this is a mindset we told ourselves, that you have to sacrifice and you can accept the status quo as to take a slow path as a women leader. So this is part, frankly speaking, I'm still doing some of the soul searching here because I do value my family first. And I love my job, but I value my family first. But whether that's a trade-off only for women to think about or everyone else, everyone in this room should share the responsibility or share the mindset, and I think we should find the answer together.
That's a great point, actually. I don't know how many people know of the National Center for Women in IT, but there's a couple of statistics that I think are still true today. So they're in tech, it's about still 17% women in tech. And also, when you look at people who are graduating with computer science, software engineering degrees, back in the 80s, it was almost at parity, 50-50, but then in the last 2 decades, it has dropped by 50% for women graduating with computer science degrees to, again, about 18%. So it's slowly starting to get back up, but we have to start with younger children. But I think there's a lot of things around the environment that has changed that women are less inclined to go into tech these days as well. So I think what you're saying is absolutely true, too, about men having to make certain choices. So NC WIT also did a study, and they found that men also want to stay at home with their kids, but don't feel like they're able to because of all the societal pressures, too. So all the things that we're talking about apply to a lot of people. Other things that folks want to mention? Sophie or Ning?
I think it's if you have a family, it's basically a trade-off, a teamwork between you and your partner. So at the different stages, it may make sense for you to slow down. At other stages, it may be for your spouse to slow down. So I think as a woman, you shouldn't be feeling that you are the ones that default because you cook better. Because only you can bear a child. That's one thing you cannot hire help from. But your husband or your spouse can play the equal important role in raising a kid. You don't really have to take that role on your own. It has to be a teamwork. So I think I'm very grateful that my husband is super supportive, and then he played at least 50%, chime in to do everything with me. So we have a daily schedule sync. Today, you take the older kids, I take the younger one. Tonight, I have this, Asian meeting, and I'll go cook, or I take the kids out. It's really great because my kids get to spend time with both parents, and they see none of us need to stay back in order to bring the other one up. In the end, both of us doing okay, and we both enjoying the work we like to do. And when the other one takes a slow lane, and then the whole family support that too. So during my entire tenure at Google, my husband actually took 2 expat track in China, added together 3.5 years, break down in 2 chunks. We did really well together because I supported him. This is something he wanted to do. And then, when he's back, he supported me very well too because he has a relatively more flexible work schedule. And then he can pick up the kids earlier on some of the days. So we really piggyback, help each other, and then to help each other succeed. So I think regardless, men or women in this room, and when you find your spouse and partner, it's really a partner. Do not expect that you'll marry someone, she's going to take care of your house, and then clean up all the rooms, and do all the laundry, and cook you beautiful meals too. And the same expectation could be played back to you too. You think about it, it's someone, you're gonna grow a family together, raise the kids together, and grow older together in some ways. And you don't have a fixed role. You can try and help each other.
So Ning, how did you do it when you moved to Facebook?
Yeah, I do see people, these days more people start to struggle a little bit with in terms of taking some risks versus taking on projects where they feel more comfortable with or more confident that it will generate impact. It's interesting. So in those choices, and so I'll probably talk about the choices where it doesn't make it gender or family doesn't make a huge difference in those choices. I start to see more people try to pick up projects which are more high confident that they would generate the impact, shooting for a higher rating at usually a lot of these companies, including Facebook, does half-year evaluation, performance evaluation. So a lot of people choose this route to shoot for a high rating at the end of the half. And it's interesting. So the downside of it is also or the question you should really ask is whether those help you continue to grow your skills as well. There's one possibility is that you are applying the skills that you already know and then keep doing things that you already know. So even if you get a good rating, then you still don't grow. And then long-term, career-wise, it also doesn't like grow, because you don't get new skills, then you don't know how to solve bigger problems. So for me, a lot of the emphasis in terms of, on the one side, is contributing what you already know, the skills you already have. An important aspect is also the making sure you continue to grow. The projects you pick and taking some risks so that you exercise and grow the skills you don't already have now, then you can continue to build and being able to solve bigger and bigger problems. And I think that's a very important thing for me. Like every half, I always have like 1 or 2 skills, new skills I want to focus on building and exercise the kind of the skills which I think is important to solve bigger problems. One thing it's interesting is like I do see, for example, we're sitting here and people assume we have been successful in everything we do. That is not true. I think even on my team, I like start to tell more people, it's like, you don't know how many times I failed, but I learned more from my failures than the ones that I succeeded. The ones that I failed, I learned more skills, and which prepared me for my next project where it's equally hard or even harder, but helps me to be really successful in those projects. So I think that's, for me, a really, really important aspect in picking these projects.
So we're going to open it up for questions now. So many. Okay, so we're going to start here and then over here in the front, and then we'll move to the back. But in order to get as many questions in as possible, if I can just ask 1 or 2 people to respond to each question, I think that would be fantastic. So over here first, somebody has a microphone. Oh, I'm making the person run for the back, sorry. And then right over here. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I think just now, Ning, you mentioned you learn more from failure. So actually this question is related to that. So it's for all of you. And is there a time in your life that you have like major setback, that you feel you almost will fail, you feel depressed, the end of the world, but somehow, because some change, mindset change, or people help, or anything, that you turn it over and make a massive success? If that is, what is this change? Thank you.
I'm not sure it fits your criteria, but I can talk about an experience. There was one half when I was at Facebook. I think there were a lot of changes on the team. I was going to do a first big reorg on my team. Then there were kind of senior managers for personal reasons transition back to IC. And then a lot of changes going on at the same time. So that's the only half I didn't have a goal for myself in terms of this is the 1 or 2 skills that I'm going to build for this half, because all my energy and bandwidth had to focus on keep the org healthy and successful, and then all focused on just getting things done. That was a very, very tough half for me. I remember, it's interesting, every day I drove to work listening to one song on repeat on my way to work, and it pumped me up for the day, get me prepared for the day, and then I went through the day, and at the end of the day, exhausted, and I was like, I wouldn't know how to go do it again next day, and then the next day I listened to the song and then go repeat, and it's amazing. So it was at the end of the half, I achieved all the things that I set out that I wanted to do. I didn't expect I would grow because I didn't set a goal to grow a skill, but ended up like I did my first reorg, which I didn't know that I could really pull off before the half, and I did it, and I actually also acquired new skills as well. So it was a very rewarding, but when I was in it, it was really, really tough. It's Rachel Platt's The Fight Song.
It's a great one. All right, next question.
Hi.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, she was supposed to be next. But yeah, right there. And then we'll get you next. Thank you.
As effective women leaders, how do you three cultivate and propagate leadership traits within yourselves? Because you have teams, so you have to do this for yourself, and I can tell you all are very strong and effective leaders.
So I co-founded the Search of Women at Google. So Search, probably being one of the engineer-centric lead, has a very, I wouldn't say the numbers, it's not much more than the industry standards, 20-30% of women, right? And even if, I think a lot of us struggled in the early days and same too. So sometimes I look back, say, do you really have to quit job after maternity leave and all that? So common things. How do you balance, life? And I have 2 kids, one 10 years old and the other 16. Sometimes just I've been there, done that, sharing that story with the women around me. It's pretty powerful. So my own org, we have a much better gender balance. Maybe being a woman leader, you naturally attract more women to your group. And and my profession, like a data scientist, data science group, is also easier to track women than pure software engineers. So I sort of like that sets me my platform. So I partnered with another software engineer director. We both at Google for about 14, 15 years. So we co-founded this group. And then we have several programs. So we form circles, and then by different level, by different stages, all volunteered. And then we also had a mentor program that's been setting up so that whatever problems you have, that you can find your peers and mentors. And then we try to give them resources. So I think what we have gone through, if we can share it with a wider women group, and then a lot of people will get an idea and find it easier to go through. Not that I have been through a lot of struggles, but I still think, if I could share with my team, go to that after school, the Chinese school, they're good, the other ones are really bad. Even just like that in the local time, it's really helpful. So whenever I have time, I love to share with people what I have done and researched. If I researched all the summer camps, I just share with my team. So I go for this ones. They're good, and worth your money. The other ones, no. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one more person to respond, and then maybe we can try to find somebody in the back there, way back there. Thank you.
So I just want to add a very short note. It's in general how I help my team. I think what I learned is just be yourself, and because I want to encourage my team to be themselves and find the best of themselves instead of trying to be someone else. The more I advanced in the career, the more I realized I cannot change myself to a different person, but I can improve myself to a better yourself. So whenever people interview me, say, what's your strengths? I will say, I'm honest and very authentic. I always admit my mistake, and I always say the truth that I believe in. I will not lie, but because I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. So I think this is important to share with a lot of people, because everyone has a different background. In different situations, you may feel you are the strongest one, and in many other situations, you felt like you're weak, you're not the strongest one. But again, believe in yourself and be yourself, because that's the source of the ultimate confidence. And I got a lot of compliment when I share my failure stories or when I admit my mistake, because my team will say, hey, we see the vulnerable yourself. You are a human being first. We like to work with you because we like yourself as a person. So I think that's my philosophy, and I think that's the easiest way for you to be successful, because you don't have to turn yourself to be different.
That's a great advice. Then we have one here, and then we'll have one in the back.
Thank you. You folks mentioned previously that there are proportionally less female
in studying engineering. And if we look at female at the exec level, there are even less and less, including manager, senior manager, VP, and there are also proportionally less female startup founders. So I wonder, my question is, A, why do you think that's the case? Follow-up question is, what do you think we can all do, everyone in this room can all do to make the situation better? Thank you.
I can start quickly because I think the fact you're sitting here, I saw a lot of women already here. I think that's a great start. And in fact, I already recognize a lot of faces here. They are wonderful leaders themselves. We just represent a group that is growing. So I do see the hope. In terms of why this is the way, and I think it's in the context of overall climate of this country and even in some ways the global trend. But what I'm very hopeful, again, when I see so many faces of a women engineer and women leaders I can recognize, I feel hopeful and we all working on. And I'm very grateful of Richard and the team of this COMPASS conference to give us this opportunity to talk about it.
One of the things you might consider is, I know many of you heard Denise Peck this morning from Ascend talk as well, and they just published a couple of reports about executives, Asian executives at different companies. And so if you want data to highlight some of the, facts around how many Asian executives there are, Ascend has lots of resources, and then also how to work with your company to provide career opportunities and support to get grassroots activities coming, but then also support from senior leaders, and that might be allies as well. So if you're not familiar with the term allies, it's really people outside of affinity groups who are at those levels who can help identify top talent and then raise people up that way too. So I would commend the Ascend report, and which has also recommendations for how you highlight these topics to senior leaders and also to your companies. So thank you for the question. I think there's one question back there and few people over on this wing, if we can get the mic over here. Okay, go ahead. Somebody back there? I think to your left. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. There are certain male workers in this industry that think women are biologically unfit for tech jobs, but obviously that's not true with you four people on stage. But if there's this person that's standing in front of you, what would you say to him? What would you say to convince him? Thank you.
That's one of those hard questions, right? There's a lot of controversy and articles written about that, so I understand the question. In terms of like what you would say to individuals, it's really dependent on the situation, right? About why did they say that, and then also what were their belief systems. Sometimes you need to understand what created that perception in the first place. I think there's lots of research studies already out there, and the three other panelists want to talk about it, they can. But what I would suggest is that if you have encountered people who have those similar belief systems, you have a lot of research backing to either have that dialogue. So we always say, in the conversations I've had about this, is try to understand, listen first to understand why the person has that perception. Don't try to argue with the person because it doesn't really get you anywhere if the person's perceptions is their own fact. But it's just really first start with listening and understanding. Others on the panel have comments on this one?
I would say I heard that probably 30 years ago or more than that, because when I was middle school to high school, and I was the top student, and I heard one of my teachers telling the other student, says, yeah, she's top, and girls, mature earlier than boys. By the time she gets to high school, the boys will take over. I heard that. I was like, shrugged my head, say, I'll prove you wrong. And I proved them wrong and wrong and wrong. So I think Mo is right. It's pointless to argue with that. Biological differences, are you serious? So where you get that data, right? I mean, I don't even want to cite research. The best thing is for girls to show them they are wrong. You can do it in every way. Yeah.
Okay, next question on this side.
Thank you for your insightful talks, and I found it very interesting that the last panel was all 4 male leaders, and they were talking about AI industry trend, but when we have 4 female leaders, then we have to talk about struggles in our work and life balance. I hope one day this situation will change. Well, then my question is, when you look back your past 10 to 15 or even 20 years career path, what do you think that you did really well that make you get who you are today? And if you have any suggestion to our female young professionals, what do you think that we can do to avoid the mistakes or avoid the pitfalls that you have faced before? Thank you very much.
I actually want to, hello. I want to address your first comment, and I will let my friends Sophie or Lynn answer your question. Your comments about the, as I said, talk about AI and we talk about life struggle, I think it's an interesting one. I would say this is a strength of women because we have a more comprehensive view of life. Life is not about work. Life is not about just about the top hot topping technology. It's really about how you pursue your ultimate happiness, not the level in technology or not the whatever conference you go. I recently delivered the keynote in Strata, and I practiced in front of my 2 young kids, and I told them later they gave me the best advice than any of my PR team or back in company. No offense to my PR team. My point is, it is a package. Even though we're talking about career here, I strongly advise view your life, go beyond the career, go beyond the AI or blockchain, go beyond the whatever going on. You will have a much better career path if you are a more well-centered person.
Okay, we have only about 4 minutes left, so let's try to get 2 more in. So 1 more on that side. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I just want to make sure the mic's ready.
There was one thing. Stanford professor David Spiegel once said, have a girlfriend time. So surround yourself with a high caliber woman, and because we talk about everything Lee knows, we distress each other. We analyze in the work-life dynamics together. We talk about which school is the best for our kids together. We talk to each other about, what's the next stage of your life? What are you looking for? We get a tremendous out of it. The girlfriend time. So from the research showed that quality girlfriend time is not only good for your health, physical health, mental health as well. So he says that the man wants to, the most interesting or successful thing for a man is to find a wife and get settled. He says the most beneficial thing for a woman actually is find a girlfriend and spend a quality girlfriend time. It's really better for yourself. So I actually think looking back at my 20+ professional career, I find almost every key decision that I made, other than my husband's support, there was a girlfriend involved.
I think for men, that's every day at work, right? Almost.
For me, so if I think about the first 7 years of my career, so one thing I would say is it's during that time when I was comfortable, I was already thinking about a change, but didn't make a change until much later. I would say, if I would do it again, then I would say, if you were thinking about change, then make a change. It's almost always, it's too late when you think it, and when you do it, rather than it's too early. It's almost never happens. So I think that's a big thing for me. But at the same time, also when you make that change, I think it's never too late is what happened for me. And when it finally happened is cherish the opportunity that you get and then focus on what you want to achieve in terms of growing skills. I think after I got the second chance at Facebook and focusing on growing skills instead of like focusing on the levels was a big thing for me. And I think that continued to be the way how I think about my career going forward.
That's great advice. Focus on skills and learning. All right, we have 1 more minute left and we'll take one more question. I have no idea who has the mic. So. Is that person in the back? In the center? Do you see the person standing up? There you go. They're running as fast as they can. Okay. Last question. Thank you.
This is really teamwork getting this microphone in my hand. Thank you all. So my question is, it's very practical. So I realized that personal branding is probably one of the most important things, except for the hard work you deliver for your personal career development. And I found personal branding to be much harder for women than for men, because culturally women have this fear of being recognized as too aggressive or unladylike, consciously and unconsciously all the time. We judge ourselves and we're afraid of being judged by other people. Especially true for women in tech. When they want to ask a question in a meeting room, they're always afraid of, am I asking too much? Am I the only stupid one here who doesn't even understand this thing? Whereas men tend to think about those questions a little bit less, at least according to my observations. I might be wrong. So how do you suggest that professional women go about this to build a healthy recognition of themselves and to set up their personal branding? Thank you.
What does personal branding mean?
Like the way you are recognized, like what people perceive you as. For example, if you're the go-to person about, let's say, front end, and he's the go-to person for setting up a server.
So we're running out of time, so I'm going to be very short. My advice is don't focus on that. Because it will be too much to think about who other people will perceive you. Instead, we should focus what's your goal, particularly in career, what kind of a goal you want to deliver as a team, what kind of organization change you want that happen. When you do that successfully, along the way, sometimes you have to build your personal branding, sometimes you don't, because it's a team effort. So my suggestion is don't focus on that, because you will get it if you do your job successfully.
I really agree with that. And so for me, it's if you're focusing on skill building and you set your goals that way, you're less affected when about external recognition as well as external criticism. And I think that's just a more stable, not stable in the sense of the career is stable, but in terms of your growth, and then you can be more sustained in your growth that way. It's at least that's how I feel.
I'll second that too. And also, don't think about other people think who you are. Just stop questioning yourself. Consciously ask yourself, the next time you walk into the meeting room, am I said the right thing? Am I the only one? Just ask. You'll figure it out. Nobody will care about you that as much as you care about yourself. Let's put it that way. So I have to remind myself of that too, right? But don't self-doubt. Even if you ask a stupid question, people forget that in 5 minutes. You'll be fine.
I think that's a great way to end. So be yourself, and I hope have a great rest of the summit.